I'll be honest with you. I'm coming up on my 5-year anniversary for lung cancer. Don't let other people's stereotypes of you keep you from living life to the fullest. And if that means you going and diving in head first and being the only girl, lady, some people are offended by the word girl, I'm not. If you're the only lady in a group, so what? You know?
That's Patty Mercier. She's the director of publicity for Women Anglers of Minnesota. She loves to fish and doesn't let anything stand in her way. This is her story, and this is the first episode of the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast. Thanks for being here.
Welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast, inspiring real women with a passion for fishing and the outdoors to go get their adventure on. Now, here's your fearless host, Angie Scott.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 1 of the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast. If you've been following this show, you would know that it started out as the It Pays to Fish podcast. And if you happen to listen to the last It Pays to Fish podcast, where I did an interview with Joe Simons from Salt Strong, you'll know why it has now changed to the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast. Super excited about this transition. Took me a little bit longer than I anticipated to get everything transitioned over and ready to roll. So I apologize for that. My goal was to get it done in 2 weeks, and I had a fishing tournament there in between. Thought I was going to be able to work on it that weekend, but that didn't end up being the case, so I had to put it off one more week. I apologize, but the fishing tournament went really well. It was on Pickwick, and it's kind of where it's the Tennessee River, and it's where like Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi all collide. It's a beautiful lake. It rained the first day. We had to change our time from safe light to 3 o'clock, and we ended up fishing from 8 to 5. And I got paired up with a guy who's super talented fisherman, and we ended up pulling off first place that day, so it was really cool. I caught my first smallmouth in the south. I hadn't yet caught one down here. I've caught several up in Minnesota growing up, but that was exciting. Learned some new techniques, mostly fished with shaky heads. I threw a weighted Texas rig Senko for a little bit, and then transitioned over to a football jig and really enjoyed fishing with the football jig and caught most of my fish with that on Saturday. Then Sunday, the rain moved out, but the temp dropped, and it was pretty chilly. Fished some different areas with different gentlemen, and I mostly fished the weighted Texas rig Senko that day and caught one really nice. Ended up being about a 3.2 pound bass, and right at the end of the day, he landed a nice fish that measured with a spinnerbait, and we ended up taking 4th place on Sunday, so it was fun. We shut it down at 2 o'clock. That way we had some time to travel back home. It was about a 3-hour drive, so anyway, really great first experience. Currently, I'm the only woman in the club, so it's kind of fitting that this first episode is with Patty, who's very much involved in fishing clubs, and you'll hear about that in her story, and just a lot of inspiration. If you're a woman out there who loves to fish but isn't connected or doesn't have the resources or even know where to start, getting involved in fishing clubs is an excellent way. And you know, maybe you don't have any women's only fishing clubs in your area, and you have some co-ed clubs, but you're a little timid. I think listening to Patty's story here is going to really inspire you to get out there and just do it. So here we go. Patty Mercier grew up open water fishing.
My dad did 22 years in the Air Force, and we used to come back to Minnesota every other summer from California. And I get a little tiny taste of it, but I loved it. And then we moved back here in 1975 and started fishing with my dad. Both my grandfathers were gone within 3 years, so my dad tried to learn what he could, but he didn't learn much. But to this day, all he does is troll with a yellow Mr. Twister. And that was one of the things. It doesn't matter. Walleyes, crappie, whatever we're going after, it's trolling with a yellow Mr. Twister.
But just in the last 3 years, she discovered a fondness for ice fishing through her involvement in the Women Anglers of Minnesota, a fishing club that will be celebrating their 41st open water tournament this June. Surprisingly, they just had their very first ice fishing tournament this year. Guess who had the honor of taking home the first place trophy? That's right, Patty and her fishing partner for that day, Christina Lemke. Do you have a preference to open water ice fishing so far?
They both have their pros and cons. I like the nicer weather for open water.
Yeah.
But I like hard water because you have no lake restrictions. I mean, I couldn't fish Red Lake up in northern Minnesota in my little 14-foot fishing boat.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't fish Mille Lacs very well in my little 14-foot fishing boat. But I can fish at hard water, all day, every day, But I like the weather better for open water, and open water is what I learned first. But I'm learning about both of them still all the time. So, I don't know. I lean towards open water.
Let's talk about this little 14-foot fishing boat that Patty mentioned a couple of times. It's a pretty cool story. I
got my first boat about 8 years ago, and it's a family heirloom. It's third generation. My grandfather bought it brand new in 1960.
Wow.
And it's got a 1963 pull-start motor on it. So my little baby.
How did you end up with that?
Well, my dad, when my grandfather passed away, because it wasn't his dad, my mom's dad, but my mom's dad, he didn't feel comfortable taking it for free, so I bought it for my grandmother.
Oh, okay.
And when he was ready to retire and wanted to buy a new boat, I wasn't in position to get it. So he sold it to his brother, and on the condition that if he ever wanted to sell it, he had to offer it back to the family. So about 8 years ago, all of a sudden, every year I would ask my dad, has Uncle Roman said anything about it? And he's like, nope. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Uncle Roman wants to sell the boat. I went, guess I'm buying a boat. She's actually been in the she was actually in the Crestliner's 2016 catalog as part of their, I think it was their 70th anniversary catalog.
Crestliner boats have been around since 1946. They're more than just a boat brand for walleye anglers of the North Woods. The name Crestliner is more of an institution. They have a rich history, originally called the Aluminum Boat Company when they started in Little Falls, Minnesota. These boats were built to last a lifetime, or in the case of Patty's 3-generation Crestliner Commodore, several lifetimes. If you want to see the actual story from the catalog, go to podcast.thewomanangler.com/Crestliner. I'll also put a link to that in the show notes, which you can find at anglerstyle.com/12. So getting your first boat and taking that boat out for the first time can be a pretty intimidating experience. What was that experience like for you?
First time I took it out would have been with my dad. But the first time I would have taken it out without my dad. I don't have any brothers, so it's just me and 2 sisters. And I'm as close as Dad got to a boy when it comes to fishing. And back then, it was before Facebook, and I got involved with the online fishing forums. And there was one, it was Hotspot Outdoors, and it was Fishing Minnesota. And I would show up at the boat launches and just meet total strangers And 99% of the time it was me and 16 or 17 guys. They did, as part of this forum, they also had a ladies group. And probably the first time I did it without my dad was when I went on a weekend trip with those guys. And it was everybody helping me get it into the water and coaching me through it. And that was my first weekend probably, quote-unquote, on my own, even though I wasn't. But shortly after I got the boat, I also ended up getting a boyfriend. And then, of course, he took over the boat. So it was a few years before I actually I had to start over again learning how to handle my own boat. I had a lot of people helping me out with that and people willing to go out with me. And I mean, at that point, launching and loading wasn't a problem. My confidence was actually once I got the boat in the water and not even running it on the water, it was more like bringing it back into the dock, you know, at the end of the day and not ramming the dock or ramming into another boat or something like that. That's where my big scare was. I had already been launching and loading my dad's boat for a couple of years. Actually, year before last, summer before last was the first time I actually tried taking out the boat out on my own.
How did that go?
That didn't go so well. I got the boat started, and all you can do is laugh through it. You know, I got the boat started, and I was fishing, and I was doing some drifting, and then slowly but surely the motor, I'm not very good with combustible engines, especially old ones. It eventually started, but as the day went, it was harder and harder to start to the point where it wouldn't start at all.
Oh, no.
And the worst part about it was I had this trolling motor that was completely charged, but the pin in the head of that had fallen out, and I didn't realize it. So even though I had a trolling motor that I could use, I couldn't steer with it. So somebody came along and saw me yanking on that thing, and then I'd sit down and do some more fishing, and then I'd stand up and try again. And, you know, I didn't cry. All I could do was laugh through the whole thing, you know? It's like, this is what happens when you give, you know, things are bound to happen. You know, there's a possibility something's going to happen when you try to do stuff on your own. But you know what? You go for it anyway.
Right.
I'm kind of one of those people that I dive in head first when it comes to trying new things. So, yeah, that was my first try taking my boat out on my own.
So speaking of diving in head first, what's it been like for you navigating the world of fishing, which is predominantly male? I'm
very open, outgoing and everything, and I would just show up at boat launches, and it was me and 17 guys, or I went on a night trolling trip on Lake Mille Lacs for the weekend, and I had my own cabin, and they all had their own cabins. I just wanted to learn. I needed to learn. I loved fishing, and I wanted to learn new ways. I had been going to the Northwest Sports Show, but hands-on is the best way to learn.
And one of the things that Patty really needed to find a way to learn was ice fishing.
My dad had never learned how to ice fish, and so I couldn't learn ice fishing from him. And between an ex-husband and an ex-boyfriend never always promising to take me out and failing in that promise, I finally turned to strangers on the Ice Fishing Minnesota Facebook group. And when I showed up at their first outing, all I had was a little estate sale ice fishing rod that I had bought and a few jigs. And I just started posting questions and started, you know, if anybody's going out and wouldn't mind a tag along and, you know, all these kinds of things, they were like, no problem. And they were the lechs. They were the, you know, guys that weren't so necessarily gentlemanly. But you weed through those and take your safety precautions and you dive in head first.
So where did the desire to learn ice fishing stem from?
You know, I live in Minnesota. They tell you the way to survive the winter and the cold and the snow in a state like this is you need to learn how to get along with winter, whether it's cross-country skiing or downhill skiing or snowmobiling. And in my case, the transition from open water to hard water just made sense. So that's where I decided to go for it. And I found the Facebook group, and I took my time. Money's not something I have a lot of, and so I took my time with getting some of my gear. And last winter was actually my first winter with all my own gear, auger and hub and flasher. Used, win raffle prizes, that kind of stuff. Well, last year was my first winter with all my own gear, and once I decided that it was something I wanted to do and started working on getting the gear, I said my big goal was to take my dad out. He was 82. He had never been ice fishing in his life. And last year I took my dad ice fishing for the first time in his life. And it was such an amazing feeling, and the grin on his face, and I'm like, you know what? He gave me my love of open water. I have to introduce him to hard water.
That is amazing. Let's talk a little bit more about Women Anglers of Minnesota. How did you get involved with that group?
I actually learned about Women Anglers in Minnesota at the sports show probably 15 years ago.
Though Patty found out about the group all that time ago, it took her a little while to get connected. Technology ended up playing a big role in making that happen.
Because it's a statewide thing, without the social media, it was really tough to connect. So I never really got involved in it. But with Facebook, it's like, okay, now I can connect with these people, and you can post, and you can see what's going on. It's so much different than when it was, just a website.
Not only is Patty involved in Women Anglers of Minnesota, or WAM for short, she's also involved in Wisconsin Women Fish. And you may remember our episode, Pays to Fish podcast episode, where we interviewed Barb Carey and talked about that organization. If you missed it, go back and check that out. It was episode 4. So why be involved with multiple organizations like that are very similar?
I have lakes that are on my wish list, and I knew some of the girls, some of the ladies from that group, and from them being members of WAM, so I joined WWF and went and fished Red Lake in a sleeper shack weekend for the first time in my life this winter.
Oh, cool. What was that experience like?
That was very cold. We were, like 3 degrees and 20-mile-an-hour winds, and you pretty much hunkered down in that sleeper shack.
Yeah.
All week long. You have to know the people you're with, and you have to like the people you're with. So that was fun, and that's part of the reason why I joined the groups, is to be able to go out and do stuff and learn stuff that I'm not going to learn on my own.
Because Patty has experienced the huge benefits of being involved in clubs, not only is she involved in these 2 women's clubs, she's also involved in 2 other clubs. And as you might expect, that keeps her pretty busy.
Well, Women Anglers has 4 events a year. Women Anglers in Minnesota has 4 official events each year.
Okay.
We have the ice fishing winter trip. Well, we have the border battle with Wisconsin Women Fish in April. We have the open water tournament in June. We have a summer trip and a fall trip.
Talk about the border battle. What is that?
That is off of a stationary barge down by La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And you take a little shuttle boat from shore near Genoa, Wisconsin. You take a little shuttle boat over to the stationary barge, and you spend the day fishing on it. There's no boats involved. You're just bringing in your catches, and you're measuring it, and you got to have somebody. It's Women Anglers in Minnesota versus Wisconsin Women Fish. And WAM has never won.
What?
So this is our year. Well, last year we only had 15 gals show up, and the year before we only had 6. But this year, in the last year, we've tripled our membership for WAM.
Cool.
And right now we have close to 30 people that have registered for it. It's about a 3.5 or 4 hour drive for us down there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an overnight thing that we do. But then at the end of the day, it's like we come down to the best 5. The people with the best 5 totals go up against the best 5 totals from the other team.
Okay.
And then from there we determine the border battle winner.
Well, wait, so you're a member of both groups, so which team do you fish on?
Even though I'm a member of both, I'm sticking with Wham for the tournament, for the border battle. I didn't go the first year. The second year I went, and even though we lost as a team, I actually won big fish with a 22-inch walleye.
Oh, nice.
So off those barges, it's really fun. It's called Clement's Fishing Barge, and it's out of Genoa, and it's an absolute blast of a day. They have a grill where you can go get burgers and breakfast sandwiches right on this barge. And then they have some biffies or outhouses or porta potties, whatever you want to call them. And the weather can really vary. This year we're having it 2 weeks later, so hopefully it'll be a tad warmer. But
hopefully it won't be snowing.
We find ourselves with our ice fishing suits on. It's so cold at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, I'm sure.
You prepare.
Yep. Well, that sounds like a blast. So quick update on the border battle, because I'm sure if you're like me, you're definitely curious to know what happened. It was the same weekend as my fishing tournament. And unfortunately, that's the same weekend that Minnesota and Wisconsin got absolutely plummeted with a huge snowstorm, a mid-April snowstorm. Patty made the probably very wise decision not to make that 3-hour drive. And not because she was afraid to fish in those conditions. It was more of the travel to get there and back. I think some of the Wisconsin women actually had to stay a little bit longer due to the snowstorm. But the results, unfortunately, Wham did not take home the prize this year. And maybe it would have been different if Patty would have been able to make it out. Who knows? They did have some ladies turn out for that. Of the 35 women anglers of Minnesota women that did register, 10 of those made it out and now have been dubbed Wham Weather Warriors. And they fished in some pretty brutal conditions. It rained, it sleeted, it snowed. The winds got all the way up to 40 miles an hour at times, and the bite was tough. But so major props to these ladies that made it out, and maybe Wham can get them next year. Hopefully the conditions will be better, too. I asked Patty to tell us a little bit more about those other clubs that she belongs to.
My other clubs that I belong to is a group called Minnesota Valley and Fishermen, and that one's been around for 40 years, and that's a co-ed club that's local. So we have monthly seminars, and we have monthly outings. And I've learned a lot from that group. There's 6 women, but only 3 of us that are active.
Okay.
And that was a little intimidating going into that first meeting, and it's all these men. But you know what? You just got to go with it.
Yep.
I mean, you're a little bit more serious about it. You don't want these men thinking you're showing up, trying to find a man. That's not what you're there for. You're there to learn more about fishing. And then the other group is just actually a new club that all they really have right now is monthly seminars.
Okay.
And it's right near my house, and it's called Twin Cities Walleyes Unlimited. And they have a sister club up in Fargo-Moorhead that's been around for 40 years. But this club's just about 2 years old, and at this point they have a couple of outings a year, and that's it. Last year was the first year for any outings at all. But it's really close to my house. It's 5 minutes from my house, and they have some great monthly speakers. Cool. So that's a way to learn more and to meet more people that like to do what you like to do.
What have been some of the biggest benefits to being involved in these clubs for you, like the Minnesota Valley and Fishermen, for instance?
I would never have fished probably Lake Vermilion in northern Minnesota because my boat is so small, but with this group, I fished Lake Vermilion. I would have never fished the Mississippi River out of a boat until this group. 2 years ago, I started fishing the Mississippi River with this group out of a boat. And so I've learned a lot from those guys and done some things I would never have done without joining that group. But you go in a little bit more serious in those.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be taken lightly. she's a girl, that kind of thing.
Well, I can definitely relate to joining co-ed group and not having very many women. I just joined the Nashville Bassmasters, and
I saw that.
Yeah,
cool.
And right now I am literally the only female. So, that's I might have a friend of mine coming out to the next meeting. I hope. So I won't be the only one, but I'm just gonna roll with it, and like you said, I'll have my own cabin or my own hotel room when we go do our little team tournaments out on various lakes, and I'm just gonna try to learn as much as I can. And
that's wonderful. It's just, what I've learned from these groups that you stay involved by getting involved. So like when the Twin Cities Walleyes group got started, I volunteered. I became a volunteer for that, for anything that they needed help with at the meetings, or being a mod on the Facebook group. And the same thing, Women Anglers in Minnesota. This year is my 3rd year, and this year I'm the publicity director. And I really learned to stay involved. You get involved with things.
Tell us a little bit about your role as Director of Publicity for WHAM. What all does that entail?
I'm publicizing all of the tournaments that we have, and I'm kind of the social media, or I should say the Facebook person.
Okay.
And so, when I'm in some of these other groups, whether it's advertising for the tournaments, but this was stuff I was doing before I even became publicity director, was I would see a gal mention in a group like a Facebook group like Fishing Minnesota or Ice Fishing Minnesota, and they would mention something about how this or that, and I would chime in about Women Anglers in Minnesota. You really need to, you should really look into Women Anglers in Minnesota. There's a lot of women, and you can get questions answered, and we've got a lot of great gear discounts, and I would kind of pipe in just on individual postings. I'm learning. I've always been pretty tech savvy, so I've been learning how to handle the website, editing it and modifying the website, and then sending out press releases. Like when we've got the tournament coming up, I'm automatically involved in the publicity for the tournaments. We actually have 11 board members, for everything from a social director to a trip director to a fundraising person to a historian. We have several board members that get involved.
When you have a big organization like WHAM, you need members to step up and take on roles and make sure that everything is covered. They have over 400 members, so that's, as you can imagine, a lot of work needs to go into running an organization of that size. Patty shared some great insight as to why a group like Women Anglers of Minnesota is so popular.
I can tell you why some people join groups like Women Anglers in Minnesota. I know we had our first Ice Fishing 101 class ever in January, and we had 33 women show up for that. And part of that was married women who don't learn very well from their spouses, significant others.
Uh-huh.
And then there are the single women who just want to learn, like me. And then there are the single women who used to have a significant other and learned to love the sport while they were with a significant other, and now that they're not with a significant other anymore, they don't know where to turn to.
Mm-hmm.
So they've turned to clubs like Women Anglers in Minnesota to not only learn the sport, but find people to fish with. We have a members-only group page where people are always posting, hey, I'm going to hit this lake on Sunday. Does anybody want to join me?
I asked Patty what her biggest challenge is being a female angler and being involved in these groups. And she's so outgoing and so brave to just go out there and jump right in and go after it. So because she has such that spirit about her, the things that other women see as challenges, really Patty doesn't see. So there was one thing, though, that kind of boiled down to a challenge for her.
My biggest thing is probably financially, because being able to afford some of this gear gets a little funny sometimes.
Tell me about it.
I mean, I bought my Vexilar used, and then I got really lucky, and I won a pop-up shelter and an ice fishing Minnesota get-together on a raffle ticket.
Oh, cool.
And I won my auger on a raffle ticket.
Nice.
So if I hadn't won those two, I'd still probably trying to figure out how to afford those things.
Speaking of gear, as we all know, is very expensive. I asked Patty what 2 pieces of gear are the most important for her for both ice fishing and open water fishing.
I wouldn't leave home without my flasher. In my case, the Vexilar. There are other brands out there, but Vexilar is what I was introduced to, and so that's where I'm at right now. But I wouldn't leave home without a flasher for ice fishing.
Patty's certainly not alone on that one. Most people who ice fish would probably turn around and head back home if they realize they forgot their flasher. If you're not familiar with ice fishing, what a flasher is basically a portable sonar unit, and it lets you see the bottom. It lets you see where your jig is and any fish that come into that area.
For open water, probably an aerator. And actually, that's really good for both. For my bait bucket, a bubbler.
Yeah.
For keeping the minnows alive. I've got a little inexpensive depth finder that I got for that, and I'm still learning how to use that.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years later, after buying it, but probably the depth finder there too. Being able to see the bottom, or like I said, the bubbler or the aerators.
Gotcha.
For the bait.
Unfortunately, they didn't have built-in live wells on a 1960 Crestliner, so that's definitely important thing to have with you to keep your bait alive. Do you have any superstitions or unusual habits when it comes to fishing?
Well, I learned the hard way about the banana suspicion.
I gotta hear about this.
Never believed it. I'd always heard about you're not supposed to bring a banana in the boat. And I never even thought twice about it. And then this fall in Vermilion, on one of my clubs, we have the big tournament up in Vermilion every year. I didn't realize it, but I had brought a banana out on the boat for lunch. Because we're out on the boat for 8 or 9 hours for the day. We don't go in for lunch. We don't, any of those kinds of things. And I didn't realize until I was done with the banana and I actually took a picture of the banana peel. By the end of the weekend, me and my partner had come in second to last place. So I almost really, truly believe in the not bringing a banana on a boat.
And it's such a perfect snack to bring out on a boat.
I know.
But you can't.
The wrapper is biodegradable. I mean, not that you throw it in the water on purpose, but it's a great snack for out on the boat. But yeah, I believe that one. And then of course Murphy's Law is the minute when things are slow out on the boat or even on the ice, the minute you go to do something else or look at your phone or grab something to eat out of your tote bag or whatever, the minute you go to do something else is the minute you're going to get a bite.
Yep.
Never fails.
It's like sometimes I'll do that on purpose just so I'm hoping I'll get a bite.
Oh, yeah. I'm the same way.
I asked Patty if she had any final words of advice for all you women out there listening to this. And what she had to say was really amazing. I used part of it as the intro to this episode. It's definitely worth hearing again.
Go out there. Do what you love to do. I'll be honest with you. I'm coming up on my 5-year anniversary for lung cancer.
Oh, congratulations.
And, I was already into fishing before that, like I said. I mean, 10, 11 years ago, I was into the fishing forums. But you know what? Don't let other people's stereotypes of you keep you from living life to the fullest. And if that means you going and diving in head first and being the only girl, lady, some people are offended by the word girl, I'm not. If you're the only lady in a group, so what? You know? You just gotta go for it and live life to the fullest and do what you want to do, and that's kind of the way I've looked at it. I've always kind of looked at it that way, but the cancer was one of those things that pushed me even further into that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want to regret that I never did this, or I let other people stop me from doing that.
Wow. I think that is an amazing way to wrap up this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed the very first Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast episode with my special guest, Patty Mercier. I hope you took something away from that and learned something. Go check out the new website. It's anglerstyle.com to get to the show notes for this episode. We're keeping the numbers in line with the It Pays to Fish podcast so that all those links still work for anybody who's going back and listening to some of those original episodes. But you can go to anglerstyle.com/12 for today's Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast episodes. You can also go straight to thewomanangler.com, and that will take you to the podcast website and all the show notes there as well. Please spread the word. Find us on iTunes. If you hadn't already subscribed to It Pays to Fish, please subscribe to The Woman Angler and Adventurer. Tell your friends. And, we'd love to build a really cool community around this podcast and our guests. So I hope you'll get involved and help us out and watch this grow. We're going to do these episodes every 2 weeks. I've got a couple other interviews already lined up, ready to go with some really exciting women. We're going to branch out into a little bit more than just focus on fishing. We're going to focus on some women who like to hunt and all kinds of other outdoor adventures as well. The whole purpose of all of this is to inspire you to get out there and do what Patty's done, and just don't let anything hold you back from doing what you enjoy. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks.